Hi, people.
Hey, everyone.
Hello.
Hey, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
That doesn't look like Matt Pateja.
No, he forwarded me the link. Is he still going to be able to sign in? Well, since I stole his link, because really he's more important than I am.
We can send him a general link.
I was gonna say I can just sign in with the general link if that's better.
I think we should be good. Oh, look, there he is.
Hello.
Hi, Matt.
It's the real Matt Pattaya.
All right. Let's get started. Can you guys see that, or is that the other screen?
We can see the PowerPoint.
The full screen or just the
full screen?
Okay, great. All right. Good evening and welcome to the virtual Boise City Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing. A few things to start out with for the good of the order. Everyone from the public entering the hearing has automatically been muted and cannot speak. As the item you're interested in comes up for discussion, you'll be called upon and unmuted. We will ask if you have slides to share or if you can use the planner slides for your visuals. If you have your own slides, your role will change to panelist. This may log you off for a moment and log you back in, and then you'll have the capabilities to share your screen. Quick overview for Zoom. The capabilities and options are a little different depending on which device you're using. If you're on a smartphone, you'll be limited to only speaking and sharing your camera. If you're on a computer, you can share your webcam if you have one, or share your screen when called upon. Some laptops might not have microphone capabilities. If you wish to speak over the phone, but watch on the computer, the phone number for the hearing is listed on the email you received when registering for tonight's hearing. For both smartphone and computer participation, there are controls on the bottom of Zoom to virtually raise your hand when you wish to speak on the item you're interested in. And if you're attending on the phone with no visual capabilities, you can raise your hand virtually by typing *9 to raise your hand. There is a chat function in Zoom. It is not part of the record and should only be used if technical difficulties arise. If the chat function isn't available for you, you can email zoninginfo@cityofboise.org with any technical issues. Our procedures for public hearings begin with a presentation from the planning team, then we'll go to the applicant and then the representative of the Registered Neighborhood Association, followed by questions from the commission. After that, we proceed to public testimony, starting with those who sign up on the electronic sign-up sheet in advance, and then anyone else who raises their hand virtually. Each member of the public is allowed up to 3 minutes for testimony. We will provide a 30-second warning and then stop you at 3 minutes. We are strict with this time as it is limited in code. When the applicant is allowed 5 minutes for rebuttal, after which the hearing will be closed and the commission will deliberate and render a decision. Tonight's agenda and proceedings will be almost the same as an in-person hearing, except we might have a bit of a delay as we learn with this new technology. Please be courteous and kind while we venture through this virtual format. Madam Chair, you have the floor.
We are citizen volunteers appointed by the mayor and approved by the city council. We make final decisions on conditional use permits, variances, and appeals, and recommendations to the city council on subdivisions, rezones, annexations, and code or comprehensive plan amendments. Any decision made tonight may be appealed to the City Council, provided that the appeal is filed within 10 days of this hearing. In order to file an appeal, you must have given written or oral testimony at tonight's meeting. So that's why it's important that you give your name and address when you testify tonight. We utilize a consent agenda. This means that if the applicant agrees with the staff report, and if there is no public opposition, the item will be placed on the consent agenda. All items that are placed on the consent agenda are approved with one motion without further public comment. For items not on the consent agenda, we will hold a full public hearing in the order just detailed a few minutes ago with staff, applicant, neighborhood association, and then the public testimony. Thank you for virtually attending tonight, and will the clerk please call the roll?
Stead,
Here.
Schaefer,
Here.
Squires,
Here.
Blanchard,
Here.
Moore,
Here.
Stevens,
Here.
Gillespie, Finfrock, Bratnober,
Here.
7 present, 2 absent.
Without objection, I will place item 2 on the consent agenda. If the applicant is present, item 2 is CVA 20-18 Frank Colson at 615 North Pierce Street. This is a variance to encroach into the street side and rear setback. If the applicant is present, please virtually raise your hand. Great, I do see a hand raised. And are you in agreement with the terms and the conditions of the staff report?
Yes, we are.
I think that was a yes. Can you confirm, please?
Yes, we are. Yes.
Okay, I heard a yes for that one. Is there anybody present tonight to testify in opposition of this item? Please virtually raise your hand.
Madam Chair, we do have a hand raised, but I believe that's the applicant.
I was just going to say, so I saw Frank Colson's hand raised, but Frank, are you here to testify in opposition of this item tonight?
Frank, I unmuted you if you'd like to speak real quick.
We've unmuted. We don't have any opposition.
I was just going to say, so I saw Frank Colson's hand raised, but Frank, are you here to testify in opposition? Great. So seeing no opposition, we will add item number 2 to the consent agenda, and the chair will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Schaefer.
I move to approve item 2, CVA 20-18 on the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a second from Commissioner Bratnober. Will the clerk please call the vote? Oh, is there any discussion? No. Okay, will the clerk please call the vote?
Stead,
Aye.
Schaefer,
Aye.
Squires,
Aye.
Blanchard,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Stevens,
Aye.
Bratnober.
Aye.
All in favor, motion carries.
Okay, thank you. So the first item tonight is item number 1, CAR 20-2 American Pacific Advisors LLC at 8306 West State Street. This is a rezone of 2.3 acres. And also PUD 20-4 American Pacific Advisors at the same address, a conditional use permit for a planned residential development. We will first hear from staff, and the floor is yours, Ms. Womack.
Thank you. I will share my screen. Madam Chair, Commissioners, the first item on tonight's agenda is a rezone of 2.33 acres at 8306 West State Street from R1A to R3D A planned residential development for 85 multifamily units is also included. The parcel was recently divided from the parcel to the south. The remaining parcels adjacent to State Street are vacant or undeveloped parcels transitioning to commercial uses along the corridor. Development of these future commercial uses will also require rezone applications with the opportunity for detailed reviews at this time. State Street is a community gateway with plans as a transit corridor. To the north is a 3-story, 180-unit multifamily residential project. To the west is a 56-unit, 2-story attached townhome style development. Across Rose Street to the east is 154 2-story attached townhomes within a residential subdivision. The requested R3D zone is compatible with the comprehensive plan as it designates the site as mixed use in the land use map, within which the R3 zone is allowed. Although a variety of other zones could be allowed here, the R3 zone best supports many of the principles in the comprehensive plan. This is because the R3 zone supports the compact walkable development pattern envisioned along State Street, a planned transit corridor. In addition, because the land is designated as suitable for significant new development, a project of this size will seamlessly fit within the surrounding area. The proposal includes construction of 85 multifamily units at 36.5 units per acre, which is below the allowed density of 43.5 units per acre. Site access will be provided by internal service drives off both Limelight and Row. Curb gutter and detached sidewalks with street trees are proposed along both Limelight and Row. All setbacks shall be measured from the final lines once the right-of-way dedication is completed. On-street parking is available along both sides of Limelight and Row. Future cross-access to the west and south are shown in the arrows here. A condition of approval requires cross-access be granted in the event the adjacent parcels developed with compatible uses. The applicant is proposing this condition be modified to only require pedestrian and bicycle cross-access. The proposal includes studio, 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units with an on-site manager. The project includes a central clubhouse, barbecue pavilion, fitness room, and pet area for future residents. The project complies with the multifamily living use standards of the Development Code and several principles of the comprehensive plan. Consistency with the citywide design review guidelines will be ensured through the associated design review permit. Some neighborhood comments were received. A few are here tonight and can elaborate further. Concerns focused on the anticipated traffic volumes impact on the road network, cut-through traffic within the neighborhood, and inadequate parking. Favorable reviews of architecture, size, and type of units were also included. Regarding traffic volume concerns, ITD commented on the application this morning, stating additional analysis was necessary, but there may be impacts to Highway 44 and the Rose Street intersection. Discussions will continue as the project goes before City Council. ACHD verified the adjacent roadways have capacity for the anticipated traffic generated from the project. Regarding concerns that cut-through traffic in the adjacent neighborhoods will increase as residents make their way to State Street intersections with streetlights, neighbors are able to contact ACHD's traffic department and request a traffic calming study be completed. However, the comprehensive plan encourages a street network that interconnects and distributes vehicle, bicycle, and pedestrian traffic to multiple streets. The applicant has included bulb outs at the entrance to Limelight in an attempt to calm potential traffic along this street. Regarding inadequate parking being provided, it is true the development code typically requires 96 parking spaces. However, the code also allows parking reductions for multifamily development. Based on these standards, the true minimum requirement is 68 vehicle spaces. It could be said this project exceeds the minimum multifamily parking standards of the development code, as a total of 93 vehicle parking spaces are provided, with 85 bicycle parking spaces. In conclusion, with the recommended conditions of approval, the proposed development complies with the standards of approval. As such, the planning team recommends approval of the rezone and conditional use permit. The Planning and Zoning Commission makes a recommendation to City Council on the rezone and a final decision on the PUD. Thank you.
We'll next hear from the applicant, and we'll start with 10 minutes, please.
Hi there, Scott McCormick. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi, good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I'm Scott McCormick. I live at 5321 West Hidden Springs Drive in Boise. I am the Managing Development Partner for the proposed Limelight Village, and it's nice to meet all of you. I've been developing real estate for over 35 years and have a passion and interest in developing workforce housing in Boise and the Treasure Valley. Thank you for the opportunity to fill in any key information that planning and development staff has not covered and highlight any key points about the project. I wanted to point out our appreciation for the planning development staff who have been very thorough, professional, and prompt in assisting us through the application process. And as I go through some points I want to make, I also want to introduce some team members that we have available tonight if there's any technical questions. We have Corinne Graham from Civil Site Works, who's our civil engineer. And we also have Walter Hughes from Humphreys and Partners, who is our architect. I have a presentation that I want to put up, and I'm trying to see how I can do that. Nicolette, can you help me?
Yep, so click the green share screen button.
Okay. The green share up on the left-hand top corner? No.
Scott, we need to change your role to panelist, so
Okay.
One moment.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Scott, you should have a green share screen button at the bottom of your screen.
I'm going to start the video, and it says more. I do not see the green share screen on the menu.
It should be just at the bottom, along the bottom in the middle.
It says mute, stop video, and more. Record on this computer. Let me open this up. Oh, here we go. Okay, share screen. Sorry. And I will go to this. Thank you for your patience, everybody. Okay, can everybody see that?
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, can you hear me and can you see it? Yes, great, thank you for the nod. So just real briefly, I want to just touch on a few slides here. This is our rendering of our building type number 1 off of Rose Street. And we really wanted to try to create we were really trying to achieve an attractive Mountain West design, and we were going for high efficiency units that you can really get a good depiction of here and that. Also, we focused on a transient-oriented development that is really very close to State Street, targeted singles and couples. And in our design, what we did is we really focused on studios and 1 bedrooms, almost 77% of them. Already mentioned surrounding properties are high density. We really want to support Boise's grow our housing efforts. And we also support the State Street urban renewal vision. And we're very happy to hear the mayor's commitment to moving that forward with our high density housing close by, and our commitment as owners and managers to encourage and educate our residents on how to use multimodal transportation options. This is an aerial that just shows the location of the site, and there are really 2 very safe routes to get to the current bus stop at Saxton, which you can see. I'll get a little pointer here. Hold on a second. Okay, right over here. And the first route is pretty quick. It's about 9 minutes and 0.4 miles. And then the other one's almost double the distance in about 13 minutes, but very useful for people that want to use that option in terms of mass transit. Oh, I did also want to point out real quickly that Valley Regional Transit is working on a new proposed bus stop here in the bottom right corner at Bogart and State. And hopefully that the new urban renewal district will help to move that along faster than they are currently planned. The other thing I want to point out was just the proximity to all the infill here. It's just it's a really good project for stepping up density and urban housing here. Talking about VRT's commitment to serving the area, they've recently increased the service for the peak periods to every 15 minutes, and on Saturdays, 30 minutes until 9 p.m. And they also have this great program for people that are a little further away from the bus transit for these $2 rides with Lyft. They're enhancing a bunch of other things. And then the other thing, if you're not, I'm pretty sure you guys are familiar, but we support Share the Ride Idaho, which has great resources for people to look into being what we call single car households. This is just a rendering of our other building type, which shows the amenity area that shows where we have some outdoor barbecue pavilions, some outdoor seating, and kind of gives a flavor for the kind of the intimate courtyard feel that we're trying to get by the way that we place the buildings on the site. This is a summary of the unit mix, just emphasizing our 2 studio apartment floor plans, 3 1-bedrooms and 2 bedrooms, and we have no 3-bedroom units. This slide shows you how the units are laid out in each of the buildings. Building type 1 has 22 units per building. There are 3 student units in here and a total of 13 1-bedrooms and 6 2-bedrooms. The design that Humphreys and Partners has done for us here is what they call their E-Stacks units. It's very efficient. There are 3 covered garages in each building, and the yellow shows you that each of the units has some outside private spaces or balcony space for their own privacy and for their own quiet enjoyment. What's interesting about these floor plans is that there are a number of split level units. You can see here with the L show lower level, and then they go to the upper level. There's an internal staircase. And so you either come in where you have your living and kitchen, and then you go to the bedroom, or vice versa. Some of the units on the ground floor are all the way through 1-bedrooms also. This is building type 2, which we looked at a little recently. And this one has the amenity area here on the south portion of the building. This building has 19 units in it, and similar points about the private space. All of them have some private space. I want to just go over the clubhouse amenities and amenities for each of the units here. It's kind of a cool space. We have a mail room, package room, and we're planning to put in a large flat screen TV in here that would provide updates for transportation options for our residents, as well as communications just about daily activities, things that are available. We have a couple of unisex bathrooms. We have a cool little fitness area that has roll-up doors for indoor-outdoor use when weather permits. And then we have the clubroom space with a kitchen, a nice clubroom area, a little reception, and then we have a management leasing office here in the corner. There's a covered deck with seating, and then right beyond that is the 2 barbecue pavilions. Nicolette showed this earlier. This is our site plan. The pet area is over here on the eastern side, and we plan to have a little pet care station, and there's another barbecue pavilion over here. One of the things that was mentioned by Nicolette in her presentation was there is a proposed cross access right here to the west and one to the south. And we're in agreement with that, but because of the circulation and the safety of our residents in this little courtyard kind of area, we propose or asking the commission, and I'll show you the language that we're proposing, that it be limited and restricted to pedestrian and bike access on both of those. And I'll show you a little bit more why we believe this would be okay for the future. Let's see. This is just sort of a reiteration that shows you what the current condition is in the report. But this diagram here shows you real briefly, here's the subject site here and outlined in red. These are the proposed cross accesses. And the 3 properties to the west are owned by the entity that owns the retreat at Silver Cloud. We understand they're planning to do more multifamily there and maybe some mixed use development. But you can see by these red indicators, they have legal access on Bogart. They have the potential to connect their existing project here. They've got access on Limelight in the corner and also here. And they have internal access opportunities. And we understand they're talking to IDT currently about doing a traffic impact study to see if they could get an access on State Street. So we believe they have ample opportunities for access and they don't really need to bring vehicles through our property. With respect to the south piece of property to the south that will be redeveloped in time, they also have a legal access per our conversation with ACHD across from Cary. We think that's adequate for their vehicle access, and we would like to propose that we just do the restriction there. And this is the language that we currently propose. Cross access restricted to pedestrian and bicycles to the south and west shall be granted upon future redevelopment of the adjacent properties. So in summary, we would like to request the commission's consideration in approving the rezone with staff conditions, approve the PUD, approve our parking using the qualified reductions and credits, and approve the cross access condition as proposed.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, and that's the end of my presentation. I'll be available for questions.
Great, thank you. First, we'll see if there's anybody present representing the Northwest Neighborhood Association. If so, please virtually raise your hand. Okay, I do see 2 hands raised. Are either it looks like Erica or Linny, are you representing the neighborhood association, and will both of you be speaking or just one?
This is Erica. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I will be representing the neighborhood association. I'm not sure who else you just said.
Actually, my name is Lonnie, and I'm not representing the neighborhood. I'm actually representing the seller.
Okay, great. Lonnie, there will be another opportunity for you to speak in a little while here, but we'll give Erica 10 minutes to start, please.
Okay,
and Erica,
Thank
please
you.
start with your name and address.
Erica Schofield, 7363 West Limelight Court. I do have a slideshow presentation that I practiced earlier today with Celine and Nicolette, so I probably need some help walking through getting that up onto the screen.
Yep, Erica, let me change your role. Hold on one moment.
Sorry about that it was at the end of the slides for some reason. Okay, is everything set?
Erica, we can only
We
see like a file explorer. We can't see any PDF slides or anything.
Okay, so this is just in PowerPoint, not PDF like earlier. So should I have put it into PDF since that was working earlier?
No, you might want to try to stop sharing your screen and now share your screen again
Okay.
because you have the document open. There we go. That looks better.
Is that better? Okay. Okay. I'm on the Northwest Neighborhood Association board.
Erica,
And
sorry,
yes.
can you just zoom in those slides just a little bit more?
Okay.
It looks like there's a, on the bottom right-hand side where it says 100%, you can move that bar just a little bit.
Is that better?
Yep.
Okay.
Go ahead, sorry.
Okay, all right. This is all new for lots of us. All right, I am on the Northwest Neighborhood Association board, and primarily my focus over the last several years has been on safety for our neighborhood. And that's what I'll be speaking about tonight in terms of safety and infrastructure. Safe infrastructure is fundamental for the success of transit-oriented development. All the documents say that. The lack of infrastructure doesn't support transit choices when it works against it, because you're not likely to walk, bike, or use transit when it's not safe, comfortable, or enjoyable. And I'm going to show you photos that actually document that. In addition, our Northwest Neighborhood Plan, which is completed but waiting in the queue to be adopted and go through the process, addresses infrastructure to safely support the increased density, especially along the corridor. So when Rose Street meets the intersection of State Street, this is what you travel. You travel a loose surface that has erosions and cut-through tracks. If you're heading eastbound on State and traffic backs up, people just drive right through that mud puddle that's rather deep and kick the water and gravel everywhere. If you're going to try to come out onto Row and make a right turn onto State, and you don't want to wait for the person who's trying to make a left, which is nearly impossible, they'll just cut through right here. It's not eligible for a signal with ACHD due to spacing, so that will never be fixed. It can't safely accommodate increased traffic right now until at least the widening project for State Road is completed. It's unsafe for non-motorized users if you're going down Rose Street towards State. Right now, we're looking at parking on both sides, which is going to leave no space for bike lanes. If you see there, you've got townhouses for Rose Street, and then these are the cars for Silver Cloud, which will just continue here. In addition, the parcel to the south, as a minor modification, received the waiver for curb, gutter, and sidewalk to be waived. So from the property line in the picture on the right, looking to State Street, you're not going to have any safe sidewalks to even reach State Street. Once you get to State Street, although the developer did show that you can walk a fairly short route to the bus, you're going to be walking with traffic at 45 to 50 miles per hour with no sidewalks, no designated bike lanes, or safety barriers on uneven surface and dirt, gravel, and grass, and it's not ADA accessible. And the future widening of this project is going to increase the risk during the time that that construction takes place. In addition, if the new bus station on Bogart is developed, the picture on the far right, which is westbound, you're going to be facing the same thing walking to that bus stop. The Corridor Transit-Oriented Development Plan, the latest version that is also currently being used on the city's website for the bus routes that are nearby, but bus 9 and 12, the plan says drive aisles and setbacks create unpleasant and unsafe walking conditions. You have to navigate large parking lots with fast-moving traffic. It creates an intimidating environment, and it outright says it's dangerous for non-motorized users. The Transportation Action Plan emphasizes the ability to ensure that there is continuous sidewalk access to get to bus stop locations. So if you want to walk a continuous bus or a continuous sidewalk to a bus location, take a moment to look at this bird's eye view map that I made. The red is no sidewalk at all. Solid green is sidewalk on one side. Dashed green is sidewalk on both sides. The hot pink line, can you see my cursor, by the way? Okay, the hot pink line is the only way you could safely walk sidewalks to reach the two buses at about a 1.25 mile distance. Yet, increasing ridership generally is based on a quarter mile to a half mile is what people are willing to walk. If you come down Limelight, no sidewalks, you have a massive storage unit and that grassy gravel area I showed you. The other side of the street, you can't even access with a crosswalk, so no sidewalks. And you get to a sidewalk when you reach Kensington. Challenging, and the infrastructure is not there. And then finally, the corridor development plan says it's for State Street and adjacent to State Street. And it says in land use and design principles, streets should provide spaces where people feel safe and welcome, with a list of elements here on the side, which I'm not going to read out loud. The pictures alone show you this is not the case for this situation. We also lack safe routes to school. Again, looking at the map, I just circled in pink the places where there are gaps in sidewalks. And if you were walking those routes, you're jumping crisscross across the road constantly to keep yourself on a safe sidewalk. And if you're a child going to the elementary school up here, you've got neither way to get there. This street right here is Bogart, and this is what you're looking at. You barely have anything right now with the bushes. And if you decide to just cross it in the morning to walk on the other side, which is slightly wider, you could, but you still don't have sidewalk. So we have major missing gaps for safe routes to school. Yet at the same time, that particular stretch was the top safe routes to school request for the Boise School District in 2015. At current, it shows that it's scheduled to possibly take place in 2022. So meanwhile, children will be driven to schools and parks, which increases traffic, fuel consumption, and air pollution because our neighborhood simply doesn't have the infrastructure to support the increasing density at this time. And the planning division, and now I'm going to move on to a totally different topic, and I'm going to go a little fast because I don't want to run out of time because this is important. The standards of conditions for approval say that swales, retention, and detention areas shall not be located along streets unless it can be shown that landscape berms and shrubs will screen the swales. This is to comply with the Boise Development Code, which says basically the same thing and offers an alternative compliance. Why is that the case? This is what you get when you have infiltration swales. This is Rose Street. On the right, you have Silver Cloud. I took these measurements this weekend. You end up with a curb and a slope and a 20-foot depth of stormwater to traipse through. In front of the Rose Street townhouses, which is just across from Limelight Village, you still have curb and slope and a 15.5-inch depth to traipse through. This is the kind of outcome that happens when swales are next to the street. What happens to the passenger? They park away from the curb because it's not safe to exit out of your car onto an unsloped or a sloped surface. You want to exit out of your car onto a flat surface. You can see that each of these cars here is parking a distance from the curb, even parking the wrong way. Like I said, you trudge through the stormwater, or you can choose to walk in the road down to the corner to reach the sidewalk. So for the development code, in terms of addressing landscaping and things like this, it has requirements that are to be ecologically and aesthetically appealing, healthy, attractive, and safe. And the landscaping is required, which I know you know that. When compliance is not feasible or an alternative means that is superior exists, then you might be eligible for alternative compliance. But there has to be required findings, and the findings need to show that there are at least one condition of topography, soil, vegetation, or other site conditions such that are impossible or impractical to resolve. needs to be equal or superior in terms of the alternative and cannot be detrimental to the public welfare. ACHD had several emails in this packet regarding this swale issue. ACHD says it's an option, which means that it's not the only method to deal with stormwater. It's unusual that they allow them. And it says if a different way of treating the stormwater is designed to meet our policies, that is acceptable as well. So you can do an attractive landscape internal swale. The Rose Street townhouses across the street did this in their internal green, open barbecue pet space right here. But I'm going to also point out that it should not be anything like Kensington has, which are basically rock pits along the street. Those are not internal swales. They are not attractive. They don't meet standards. I point those out because that's already been allowed in our neighborhood. I asked that you do not approve the recommendation in the conditions of approval for this drainage swale system. It doesn't meet code. It's not aesthetically pleasing or attractive. I'm going to say this as an advanced master gardener from the University of Idaho Extension. It's simply ugly. As a master gardener, you would never recommend this to anyone's landscape. It doesn't achieve a safe environment either. It does not meet the purpose and standards for alternative compliance. The site condition is not impossible or impractical to address.
10 minutes.
It's not equal or superior, and it's detrimental to public safety and welfare. In addition, the high water use in this area, or high water issue, is known in this area. Silver Cloud was approved by Ada County approval prior to annexation, so they probably had different standards. It's difficult to mow for landscape workers. It requires frequent herbicides seeping into the groundwater to keep the grass from continually growing into the bottom of the drainage area. And essentially, this sacrifices citizen safety for an increased ROI. So this weekend, I have a few more slides. I drove around to see if any other parts
We're 10 minutes.
have this. Please, can I show the last few slides to show examples of how other areas do not have infiltration swales? So this is Park Center and Front Street.
Yeah, sorry, let's put 5 more minutes on the clock, please.
Thank you. I found one place on Park Center. It does have a swale with no parking. So no one has to get out and encounter that. On Front Street, no stormwater retention on the street. In East Boise, no stormwater retention along the streets. In the Arboretum, no stormwater on the streets, but they have an internal stormwater retention area. And on Barber Valley Drive, no stormwater on the streets. They have inset parking with designated bike lanes and a wide sidewalk with real planters. This is pedestrian and bike friendly. I have more slides, but my time is up, so I will comply.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Schofield. We'll now move on to questions from the commission, please. Commissioner Stevens.
Hi, everyone. Nicolette, I have some questions for you. Can you turn your video on? Is that okay to ask? It seems strange to just stare at your name. At least we pretend like talking to each other.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, I apologize. My video doesn't work.
Okay, gotcha. Well, at least now I can hear that you're there. So I wanted to know, there is a chart related to, I have a series of questions about parking. And there's a chart on page 3 of the staff report. And there's some asterisks at the bottom of that chart that say that there are some conditions that the applicant would have to meet for the code to allow for a reduction in parking. So I was just wondering if you could walk us through what those requirements are and whether or not the transit-oriented development requirements were part of that sort of calculation.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, definitely. So development code allows parking reductions for multifamily development as long as you meet detailed criteria. And the analysis for that criteria is found on page 7 of your project report. It says that, let me pull this up just real quick. It says that the available on-street parking applies to allow the parking reduction. So the minimum parking requirement can be reduced by 1 space for each on-street space located immediately adjacent to the site. It also allows a parking reduction for developments within 1,320 feet of existing or planned transit, allows a 10% reduction. In terms of the available transit, again, the code says that existing or planned transit qualifies. It's planned transit in Valley Connect 2.0 along this section of state. And then there's existing transit further down State Street as was already covered.
Madam Chair, could I follow up?
Yes, please, Commissioner Stevens.
Thank you, Nicolette. So I had a couple of follow-ups related to that. So from reading the packet, I understand that ACHD does not have any concerns with the on-street parking. Is that correct? Do I understand that correctly?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, that's correct.
Okay. And then my second question is related to the second requirement to get that reduction, and that is related to the transit. So as I understand our code right now, we don't have anything other than a number of feet to actually assess whether or not this should qualify for that. In other words, 1,320 feet that has detached sidewalks on both sides of a street is equal to walking along State Street, where it's, you know, incredibly fast and there's 0 sidewalks. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Stevens, could you clarify the question?
Sure. So there's no place in our code or in our guidelines that help us make a distinction between a street, a 1,320 foot, distance between a development and a bus stop, say, that has detached sidewalks on 2 sides of that 1,320 feet versus a 1,320 feet distance that is along State Street with 0 sidewalks. Is that right? There's basically those 2 things are the same in our code, correct?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Stevens, that is correct. The code says, and I quote, "The minimum parking required for developments within 1,320 feet of existing or planned transit lines shall be reduced by 10%." And it does not distinguish connected by sidewalks, sidewalks on both sides or not.
Okay, and Madam Chair, can I have one more follow-up on this line of questions?
Yes, please, Commissioner Stevens.
I guess my last question on this point is, other than the parking then, was there anything about this development, any sort of, other than other than the parking, that the developer received a positive recommendation from staff for that's related to this bus stop or related to the transit-oriented development, or was it just the reduction in the parking?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Stevens, I believe you're asking if any other sections of the review hinge on the bus stop being present.
Yes, thank you.
You're good. And the answer would be no. It is justification, I think, for the higher density zone, but there is not specification that the transit stop needs to be existing before we rezone. There's multiple principles in Blueprint Boise that discuss the classic cart before the horse scenario of transit and multifamily. It actually recommends rezoning before we have the transit so that we can get the transit there faster.
Okay, great. I'll leave it at that for now, Meredith, and let somebody else get a chance. I've got a bunch of other questions that somebody else may ask them. So thank you.
Great. Is Do we have other questions from the commission?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Bratnober?
just a quick one. I want to make sure I have the right picture in my mind of the numbers of spaces. So if there were no breaks given for proximity to bus stops nor on-street parking, Nicolette, is it correct that there will be 96 vehicle spaces required?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Bratnober, that is correct. 90.
Okay. And so in reality, what we're looking at here in terms of a parking, I mean, this would be the equivalent of asking for a variance of 3 spaces to come in with 93. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Bratnober, that is correct.
Thank you.
Questions from other commissioners?
Madam Chair.
Was that Commissioner Moore?
Yes.
Yes, please go ahead.
I have a question about Nicolette mentioned the ACHD saying that they might need more study needed, or they might have more study needed in an email this morning. Are there any more specifics about that study and what they might want to study?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Moore, ITD was routed the application months ago. They were unable to comment until this morning on the application. Their comments stated that they did not have the traffic generation analysis, which was done by ACHD on the project, and that they would need additional time to consider the impacts that this development would have on the intersection and on Highway 55.
Thank you.
Commissioner Stevens.
Madam Chair.
I saw Commissioner Stevens' hand go up, but then did somebody else say Madam Chair? Was that Commissioner Squires? Okay, Commissioner Squires first, and then we'll go to Commissioner Stevens.
Okay, thank you. There was a comment that was made that there was a condition for future cross access to the project to the west, and the applicant wants to remove this condition. Can you further elaborate what the concern may be?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Squires, would you like to hear from the applicant on the concern with the condition?
Either or, whoever can best answer that question.
I think I should defer to the applicant.
Hi, Madam Chair, Commissioner Squires. Yeah, we've worked closely with the planning and development staff on this, and we're in agreement that it would be helpful in the future for pedestrian and bike access. But all we're asking for is, so we agree that having cross access is good, but we believe that the vehicular access into our property would be detrimental to the safety of people walking in and out, and that it's really not necessary because both of the other parcels have legal access for vehicles.
Thank you.
Commissioner Stevens.
So I actually would like to know what staff thinks about that, because cross access in my mind is inherently vehicular. So in my mind, that would be changing the condition entirely and removing it. So I'd like to hear staff's thoughts on that.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Stevens, as you can see, adjacent to to this property, to the south is roughly 300 feet before State Street. An additional access to the south would eliminate additional access to State. It is, as the applicant stated, it is possible to achieve an access off of Row for their own development. However, if it's a commercial development, it might need additional access points depending on the use. So we like to preserve this option for the future. Regarding to the west, it further assists with preventing future access along State Street. It allows, especially for pedestrian, it allows ease of access to access different spots around the neighborhood. So as we get closer to State Street, we encourage it more strongly.
So Nicolette, if this is Commissioner Stevens, if we were to limit the west access through the site, does that meet then the goal? And if not, if staff feels like we do need vehicular access to the west, are you concerned about pedestrian safety through the site, through the subject site?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Stevens, pedestrian safety through the site, there is wraparound sidewalks. The turnaround for existing parking spaces can continue on westward. It's important as we phase development that each piece leaves the opportunity for connections through the next piece. So say we were not to require it today and we saw the development come in to the west later, we would hate to be facing a situation where we didn't ask for cross access today and then we don't have the option later.
So I guess what I'm asking though is if we limit it to pedestrian only, will it achieve the goals that the city has for that cross access that you're recommending?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, it would not achieve the most goals that we're trying to achieve with our condition.
Okay, great.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Schaefer.
I had a couple of follow-up questions for Nicolette on the same topic. And Nicolette, I did look through fire's comments. I don't specifically remember anything relating to the cross access and fire and their approval. Is there, if we were to eliminate that cross access, does that create an issue with the fire department in your mind?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Schaefer, it does not create an issue with fire as the service drive widths are wide enough to service the buildings in the rear.
Terrific. One more quick follow-up, and not that I don't believe the applicant here, but has staff or ACHD or ITD, has anybody vetted the other cross accesses, particularly on the parcels to the west?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Schaefer, ACHD does not typically make comment on cross-access internal to developments as their jurisdiction focuses on the right-of-way.
Okay, so at this point, with regards to the slide that the applicant shared with us showing multiple cross access access points for those parcels to the west, we're just essentially have to take his word for that at this point.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Schaefer, you might want to hear from the applicant and find out where that came from, but no development has been approved, so any comments are still preliminary.
Terrific. Madam Chair, if the applicant would like to sound off, is that okay?
Yes, yeah, go ahead, Mr. McCormick.
Thank you, Commissioner Stead and Commissioner Schaefer. I would just state that I did make phone calls to both IDT and to ACHD, and I talked to Stacy Yarrington there, and I did review with her what the legal accesses were available to the landowner adjacent to us to the west, which owns all those parcels together. And she confirmed the accesses that I did show. She verbally confirmed with me that these were legal accesses. The one on Bogart, the one that they could connect between their project and the property, the one on the corner at Limelight, and then the other one at Limelight. Now, the ones on State Street are definitely, those are negotiable with IDT based on their traffic study.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you.
Actually, Madam Chair,
Yeah, Commissioner Schaefer.
I actually had another follow-up question for the applicant on a separate topic, if I may. Mr. McCormick, The neighborhood association made some good points in regards to the swale design along the streetscapes along Row and Limelight. Could you just walk us through why you're proposing those? Is there a reason why you want to use the swales in that particular instance, or do you have some other options there?
Yeah, in this case, we meet the requirement of the fact that there's a high water table there. And therefore that was the point which we needed to create the swales. In addition to, it's an existing condition that's being used at the adjacent project, the retreat at Silver Cloud. We worked closely with the planning and development staff. So as you look at that current bracketed red area there, we worked with Nicolette and Casey and the staff, and we actually increased a 5-foot wide landscaped area there that they had requested that we do on Limelight Street in order to allow the trees to shade over the detached sidewalk. And that cost us a few parking stalls within the project to get us underneath. We were trying to deliver the full 96. And we worked closely with our civil engineer and ACHD, and this was all within their code guidelines and approved and allowed under the codes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Any other, yeah, Commissioner Stevens, please go ahead.
So I have two last areas I'd like to just ask that I think are pretty quick questions. The first is there was some concern from the neighborhood, Nicolette, related to design features. Yes, there was, praise for the architectural, but there was some concern about the natural materials and wanting greater use of natural materials like stone and wood. I don't think there's a design review overlay in this area. Is that right? And so does the design ultimately rest with whatever decision we make tonight?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Stevens, there will be a design review overlay put on this rezone. So it does have an associated design review application. We've worked closely with the planner, Casey Babb, for the design review application. She's given preliminary comments to make sure the project is as close to acceptable as possible before the design review hearing. But there will also be a design review hearing where they go into greater detail about the types of materials, if anything is a faux version of any materials. They vet those quite often for making sure they're quality versions of those materials and they can withstand typical weather elements and whatnot.
That's great. Thank you so much. And then Meredith, just one last question, if I could.
Yes, Commissioner Stevens.
So I am concerned. I mean, the applicant's done a great job of including detached sidewalks. So I think can't fault him for this, but we are dealing with a neighborhood or an area that, and I think that the neighborhood association did a great job with their slides of showing just how much of a gap there is in this neighborhood with regard to connectivity for pedestrians. And I guess, this neighborhood is under so much pressure, development pressure right now. And I'm very concerned with the safety of the residents. And so when we look at, I know that ACHD is responsible for sidewalks on their streets, but when we look at Highway 44, I'm just curious whose jurisdiction that is. And do we as a city, as a municipality, have any ability to, require that some sort of sidewalk be in place so that this is a safe route to walk to the bus stop? Who does that? Whose jurisdiction is it? And how do we as a commission and as city council elected people make sure that that happens along that route?
I believe that's a question for staff. Madam Chair, Commissioner Stevens, do you want to confirm?
Yes, that's for staff.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Stevens, this section of State Street or Highway 55 is within ITD's jurisdiction. ITD clarified they do not have an adopted plan at this time for improvements along this section of State Street. There are many things in the work that the applicant talked about, the urban renewal district, transit-oriented development plans that discuss the importance of the section of State Street. In terms of it, once a bus stop comes at Bogart, there are sidewalks available to get to that bus stop. Regarding actual State Street, there's an existing canal adjacent to State Street, which requires significant coordinated work to improve that street frontage. It will be very important on the adjacent development when they do develop that we sort out a coordinated vision to making this a more pedestrian friendly place.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission?
Madam Chair?
Commissioner Brattenberg.
I have one question for the applicant. So in some of the testimony that we've received in our packet, I came across one where it was talking about plans to rent the garages separate from the units. Can you tell me how that works, please, or if that is indeed the case? I think you're muted still.
Take me off. There you go. Thanks. Yes, Madam Chair, Commissioner Brad Nober, thank you for that question. The current plan is to have a separate garages that are rented to whichever units would like to rent those, and then we would just have a device on the garage that you would use as a code, and you'd also have a clicker to open that garage up. But they are not like tied back into the units that are adjacent to it. It just gives us more flexibility to figure out who is more interested in those garages, and that's really the purpose of that.
Okay, so some of those 93 spaces, someone may opt not to use some of the available garage space because it costs extra.
Yes, I mean, that's kind of a market condition kind of thing. I mean, we'll watch it carefully as we lease up, but we would, we would price it accordingly. I mean, if people weren't demanding it, we'd lower the price until people, were.
Pardon my dog.
Right.
Just a second, please. Sorry, squirrel. Anyway, okay, so in effect, if people don't want to rent those because of cost considerations, we're kind of seeing the number of available spaces go down, in effect, is what might effectively happen there.
Yeah, I would say to you that income is not sufficient enough that we would, not allow those to not be used. I mean, clearly, we are looking at a transition development here that is, going to be using the improvements that Nicolette was referring to along State when they get the new bus transit in and that. So our goal here is to create a vibrant project. So if people are saying, I'm not going to rent it for $50 a month or whatever, we'll find a way that they'll use the stalls and we won't have them unused.
Thank you.
Any last questions from the commission? Okay, seeing none, we don't have anybody signed up to testify on this item tonight. Is there anybody present that didn't sign up that would like to testify tonight? Please virtually raise your hand. I do see a couple there. So we'll just start at the top and work our way down the list. We can start with Mr. Coles. Please start with your name and address and you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Brent Coles. I'm at 6780 Casa Real, Boise, Idaho. I'm in the Northwest Neighborhood Association area. And want to compliment the developer. It's a beautiful design. It someday in the future would be very appropriate at that location. Currently, without, as you saw, a Rose Street intersection onto State Street is very dangerous. And the Limelight project, our neighborhood, that is a major intersection for us to enter onto Highway 44. When that is improved and when you have sidewalks going down State Street to the bus stop, this project could be very supportive of the neighborhood and the city's comprehensive plan. But currently, we recommend that this project be denied. Also would indicate that the overall idea and concept of allowing development first in hopes that we'll have transit along State Street is just really the reverse. The opportunity for the city of Boise to partner with private development occurs when you withhold the approval of a development project and development projects. The developers will come together with the city, with the state, and they will be a third partner in helping you provide the transit-oriented or the transit systems that we all want in the city of Boise. When I heard the developer say there were 2 safe routes to the bus stop, I could hardly believe my ears. State Street is 45 miles an hour along that area. Boise City currently, we do not see any traffic enforcement along State Street. It's divided with Garden City. They're on one side of State Street, Boise City on the other side, but there is absolutely no traffic enforcement along there. Cars are going 50 to 55, even up to 60 miles an hour along that area. And to think that someone could walk safely from Rose Street down to that bus stop is just absolutely ridiculous. And the credibility factor goes away when someone says something like that. So again, recommend that you deny the planned unit development and the rezone until you actually have transit in that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coles. We'll move on to Mr. Llewellyn. And again, start please with your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me? Yes, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Richard Llewellyn, 9170 Hill Road, Boise. So first of all, I submitted comments about air quality and a lot of scientific evidence showing that if we're going to have TOD, unfortunately, the planning community seems to have completely overlooked the reality on the ground. And so either you're going to pay attention to that or we're not, I should say we, because, you know, when I weighed in on some of this transit-oriented development stuff, I overlooked that, but we shouldn't. And one way of beginning to mitigate that would be to require safe routes to clean air. We need to do that moving forward. Infrastructure before development. I wholeheartely second Mr. Cole's comments on that. 40 years ago, I was a 6th grader at Pierce Park Elementary. My little sister was in 4th grade, and she was lucky enough to be the first cohort to have the modular classrooms there. Now, I remember at the PTA meeting, which was widely attended because nobody wanted to be putting their kids in the modular classrooms, promised, you know, oh, it would happen. All we needed was more students, 5 years max, and Pierce Park Elementary would be expanded. You get the infrastructure. 40 years later, it's happening now. That's the history of our neighborhood. 32 years of promised fire stations, 2 fire stations in the Northwest, in which multiple developments and annexations were permitted based on these promises. It just simply doesn't happen unless you require the developer either phase their project to the required and the necessary infrastructure, or as Cole said, you generate the momentum and the political will, because clearly we as residents have no political power to enforce this, or this kind of pattern would not have happened. So that bus stop on Bogart, we need that. And this was going to come up again. It came up with the project on 9000 West State, and it will continue to come up. Let's require that these developers get together, call their state senator or whoever they need to call, and make sure that happens. Valley Transit 2.0 is essentially a pipe dream, as we all know. It's unfunded, could be 10, 15 years from now before we actually get a bus stop there. So also if I looked at the plat correctly, we're talking about 3 more parking spaces being lost if the connection goes to the south. Correct me if I'm wrong. I like little parking personally. I think it's great, but we need to have the transit. We can't just live in a make-believe world here. We've been doing that too long, and that's the way you break neighborhoods. It's not the way how you create better neighborhoods. So let's just ensure that we actually have the phasing at least to a actual bus stop on Bogart. That being said, is it fair to the applicant? Well, I don't know. I mean,
Clerk, 3 minutes.
Okay, I couldn't quite hear that. The other thing is, did you read the letter from the Retreat at Silver Cloud saying they didn't want access to the west? So I think that might be important. Thank you. I wasn't sure. Were you saying my time was up?
Yes, 3 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Llewellyn. Next on the list is Ms. Schofield. Again, please, start with your name and address.
Okay, so I will speak for myself this time. Erica Schofield, 7363 West Limelight Court. I would like to take a peek at the other slides I had, although I'm not sure how to get there. So can we pause the timer for a minute? I have Nicolette's screen up.
Erica, I'll have to promote you again.
Okay.
One moment.
The timing has been paused, just to let you know.
Share. Thank you. Getting the hang of this. So I'm going to move quickly again. So we already have on-street parking hazards because people like to park the wrong way in this neighborhood. And as density increases, we're absolutely going to need to somehow mark the fire hydrant signs. I managed to get photos without cars in front of them, and I walk this route quite often. But when it gets crowded, people don't care and they park in front of those fire hydrants. In addition, this application shows 2 more fire hydrants are needed. And if you look here, so here's fire hydrants. Most likely there'll be one on Rose Street, which will take a parking spot, and probably something internally that may take 1 or 2 parking spots because you can't park in front of these and still be safe. I want to address the undue burden and adverse impact issues. We're not looking at actual response data for fire service when we do these analysis. It's not included. The entire city is being placed at risk, and I'll show you those numbers shortly. Eagle Fire District was not solicited for comments, even though they regularly provide service to our area. And the adopted level of service is a standard adopted by ordinance in the master siting plan and the impact fee ordinance. These are all really critical issues. If we rezone to higher density without adequate infrastructure, we overcrowd the land, we place undue burden on facilities and services, and we create adverse impacts on citizens and businesses. So are the response times increasing, even though the Boise Comprehensive Plan says we are to maintain or continue to improve them? Is growth placing an undue burden on services and adversely affecting other properties? The data proves it. It doesn't lie. In 2004, we met our response time, which was 4 minutes. We're at 4:08. By 2019, we're at 7 minutes and 12 seconds. We're not keeping up with growth. We're not expanding capacity to meet increased demand. We built 1 station, Harris Ranch, in 2011. That's it. Does it adversely affect other properties? The fire department actually said so. At the prominence hearing last May, they said, as you add units, you're just going to slowly increase the chance of a concurrent call coming in. When a concurrent call comes in, the next nearest fire station responds, which extends the response time. If you're on the end of that response time, that's not a good place to be. And we're placing an undue burden on Eagle Fire District. From a year's period of time, November 18 to November 2019, EFD provided 339 responses into the Boise territory. We gave them 47 responses. Those are some facts and some data that are not being shown. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schofield. Next, we have Mr. Dunn, please. 3 minutes, and please start with your name and address.
Thank you. My name's Dennis Dunn. I live at 8940 Duncan Lane in Boise, Idaho. Just to confirm, can you hear me? Just okay, great. We're all getting used to this new world and new way of doing business. I'm not there yet. So I would actually echo a couple of comments earlier by Mr. Coles and by Ms. Schofield. When I look at this development and where it's proposed, the location, if we're going to put density anywhere, this is an area where density makes sense. And when the infrastructure is there to support this level of density, I would support this project. That is currently just not the case. One specific about this development, I just have to make a comment about the assumption about cars per houses and per unit. The reality is it's hard for people to make a go of it, and to think that we're not going to have folks doubling up and tripling up and having lots and lots of cars in these relatively small living spaces, I think is just not realistic. And also, Commissioner Stevens, I just want to thank you for the recognition that our neighborhood, you didn't use the words under siege, but I will. The amount of pressure and the amount of development that's being proposed in our neighborhood is really staggering. It's really every week and every month that we are on deck to try to navigate what's going on. So I really appreciate that recognition. And Ms. Schofield is not someone who speaks lightly. She does her homework. And when she tells you that the fire protection and service is actually inadequate, it was the basis of denying prominence. And if that ever gets approved, and my goodness, we hope not, you're talking about another 400 or 500 units when you combine all of these two developments alone. And we're putting a strain and stress on our systems and really putting our people who service at risk. So for the items that first of all, thank you for your service and thank you for the opportunity. And I would respectfully recommend denial of both the rezone and the PUD. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. That was the end of the virtual hands I saw. If anybody else is looking to testify on this item tonight, last chance to please virtually raise your hand. Okay, seeing none, we will move on to the rebuttal from the applicant, please. And again, 10 minutes.
Madam Chair, rebuttal is 5 minutes.
Oh, thank you. 5 minutes, Mr. McCormick. Sorry about that.
It's all right. Don't worry about it. That's fine. Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. You know, we've listened to these concerns and points made by the neighborhood association and neighborhood folks. And I think what we recognize here is that this is a transition neighborhood and that the comprehensive plan and the need for housing in the area is very important. And we're at a point now where we're proposing a project that fits within the guidelines, fits within the code. We're paying the appropriate impact fees. We've worked with all of the different agencies. We've worked very closely with the planning and development staff, and we've really gone through the checklist of these items. We know that it's not ideal in terms of the access to bus transit, but we do know that there are major commitments by different agencies, including the city of Boise, to create more housing, to create better transit. There are options, and with technology and a lot of things that are available to us today that they weren't available 20 years ago, it's our sincere belief and opinion that those bus stops and those other options will get better, including as redevelopment occurs, which is being proposed. We understand that the Silver Cloud folks will be submitting a plan for their properties. There'll be additional sidewalks. We are putting in the appropriate sidewalks, the appropriate landscaping, the appropriate drainage. All of those items, we have worked very closely to make sure that we met all of the codes, and we're not responsible for fire response times. We know that the appropriate amount of money will be going to that, and as it gets closer to that, they will improve that. But for the most part, I would just like to reiterate that We are very proud of this project. We think it fits within what the city is looking for. And we would just respectfully ask your approval with the conditions as the staff has recommended.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. So that ends the public portion of the hearing, and the item is now before the commission. This is to recommend approval for CAR 20-2, and we are the final decision for PUD 20-4.
Madam Chair, if I might.
Yes, please, Commissioner Blanchard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm very sympathetic to the residents' concerns over the impacts on their neighborhood. However, most of us have been around long enough that we know there have been plans to improve State Street for over 20 years now. And this is the unfortunate situation that we're in, is that really the only thing that P&Z or the city of Boise controls here right now is the land use decision. And we simply don't have control over curb cuts and improvements to State Street. And the appropriate venue for those issues for the neighborhood association is frankly with ITD and ACHD, who own those properties. So I think we probably all sympathize with the neighborhood over the disconnect between land use and transportation planning. There's just simply nothing that we can do about that here, except lend a sympathetic ear. But I will be supporting the development because, again, what we can do here is support the land use decision. And this is a valley that's in desperate need of housing. And I think the applicant has taken the time to do his homework, and I concur with staff on approval.
Thank you. Is there a motion that we can propose?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Stevens?
I'll go ahead and move that we approve PUD 20-4 and recommend approval of CAR 20-2.
I'll second.
Second from Commissioner Schaefer. Is there further discussion? Commissioner Stevens?
Yeah. I guess none of this will surprise you guys because it is in line with the questions I asked. And I think that staff put it really well, as simple as it is, but it's sort of a chicken and egg discussion we're having here. And I think Commissioner Blanchard is exactly right that we have a land use decision to make. One thing I'll disagree with Commissioner Blanchard, or not disagree, that makes it sound like an oppositional, which it's not. But I do think that the city has been doing a really good job of State Street planning. And I think I was sitting here, you may have seen me kind of over here. I was scrolling through our plan. It's a 71-page plan. It's available on the internet that anybody can find, and of course has been adopted by the city. And I was reminded just how much planning has gone into a vision for State Street. And I'm quite heartened, as much as it has pained me over the last few years to have to drive down State Street past through and to Collister. We've actually been making some progress, and I'm really pleased with the plans that are in place. And I am concerned that we don't have a date for when the Bogart bus stop is going to go in. But I do agree with staff that it's really a chicken or egg sort of question. And, it's not that it's the thing that's nice is that there is actually a plan, and we've seen it starting to be implemented in the city. So that makes me feel not great about this, particularly with regard to the safety, but it does make me You know, I feel like the State Street problem is gradually being addressed. I also want to say that, you know, if this was an application that was asking for 60 parking spots because they were taking advantage of the, not taking advantage in a negative way, but that they were using the code to sort of ask for a really huge reduction in parking, I would be much more concerned about those issues. But I don't really think that that's the issue here. We are talking about a three parking spot difference between what code would just normally require. So I'm comfortable with that. And I think this is not a, you know, this is not necessarily a family type development. This is really geared toward young professionals, considering the number of units that are, or the number of bedrooms in the units. So the last thing I want to say, or actually there's two more things I want to say. First, I think that we need to keep the cross access in the conditions the way it's written now. So my motion does not include any changes to that. And then I want to say that I'm concerned that our code doesn't differentiate other than just in distance. I'm really concerned that, you know, we do have lots of different policies that tell us we need to be concerned about safety. And this is clearly an extremely unsafe situation. But we don't currently have anything in our code to help us and make any sort of assessment between 1,320 feet on State Street versus 1,320 feet on, say, 20th Street. Those are two totally different situations, and our code doesn't really permit us to make any sort of distinction between that. So I think that's something we're going to need to take up in the near future at our, you know, in our work sessions and with staff to see if we can address that, because I think it's going to become more and more important as we continue to develop out State Street on this transit corridor. So I'll be supporting, obviously, the project.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Schaefer.
Commissioner Stevens is a tough act to follow. I think she dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's for a lot of the notes that I had as well. Just a couple of quick follow-ups. Yeah, this is very much chicken and egg situation. In a lot of ways, I agree with everyone that spoke tonight. You know, I am heartened, like Commissioner Stevens, that, you know, there's motion to improve State Street. And while this project might be a little bit behind or a little bit ahead of those plans, I feel like we shouldn't punish the applicant for putting forth a good project, right? Just because State Street remains a little bit of a question mark right now. And having said that as well, you know, this applicant is improving the streetscapes that his property fronts on, and he's actually not responsible to make any improvements to State Street. So obviously, I think he's done everything, or the team has done everything that they can to make a positive impact on the site. And again, the State Street question is problematic, but I'm in favor of the motion because there is movement on improving State Street. And I think as we continue to see more developments come along on this corridor, that's going to continue to put more pressure on making those improvements a reality along State Street. So I am also in favor of the motion.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Bratnober.
Thank you. So I'll be supporting the motion as well. I think the applicant has done a responsible job in terms of covering a lot of issues. As Commissioner Stevens pointed out, the parking, I mean, it looks like basically a three slot variance. There are a couple of things, though, that while we shouldn't saddle the applicant with them, I think they need to be in the record. And the first and most important in my mind is emergency services, which falls in that general bucket of infrastructure that's not prepared. We've been down this road as a commission several times before when you look at emergency response times in that part of town. And I'd like to see more motion in terms of addressing these kinds of shortfalls, because it'll sure bite us someday, and the results will be tragic. And so I want to make sure that we're looking at that. And the second is, better coordination between our departments. And I don't hesitate to say this because I know we're all living with it, but just in terms of understanding the sequences of when bus stops will be going in, when curb gutter sidewalks will be installed. We have plans, but it'd be nice to be able to coordinate development with how those plans are actually being executed and along what timeline. Thank you.
Any further discussion from the commission? Okay, we have a motion to recommend approval for CAR 20-2 and to approve PUD 20-4. Will the clerk please call the vote?
Stead,
Aye.
Schaefer,
Aye.
Squires,
Aye.
Blanchard,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Stevens,
Aye.
Bratnover.
Aye.
All in favor, motion carries.
Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break before we return for item 3. So let's convene again at 7:40. I'll just give it about one more minute until I see a couple more of our commissioners back in place. Okay, so next up is item number 3. This is CAR 20-3 and PUD 20-3 from Biltmore Company at 3635 West Elder Street. It's a modification to development agreement and a conditional use permit. We'll first hear from staff, and the floor is yours, please, Mr. Holmes.
Thank you. Can you all see my screen? Perfect.
Yes, we can.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, before you is a development agreement modification request to increase building heights and include multifamily residential uses on 8.7 acres of land located at 3635 West Elder Street. Also included is a conditional use permit for a planned residential development comprised of 84 multifamily dwelling units on the northern 3.9 acre portion of that same property. This is located in an LOD with development agreement zone. The property shown here in red is located on the north side of I-84, just across from the airport and between the Orchard and Vista interchanges. To the north and west of the property is an established single-family residential neighborhood zoned R1C, and to the east is Oahe Park and hotel and office uses. Airport-owned properties lie approximately 275 feet to the south on the other side of the interstate. The subject property does lie within airport influence areas A and B1, which I'll cover more in depth in later slides. First, I'll cover just a little bit of history on the current entitlements that exist on this property. So in 2000, the entire 8.7 acre property was rezoned to limited office with designer view and a development agreement from a previous residential zoning designation of R1C. The associated DA and conceptual site plan shown here provided for the development of 3 office buildings with limitations on building heights the closer residential properties they are. Other conditions included the installation of a 30-foot wide landscape buffer and limiting the access between the neighborhood and the office development to emergency access only. The proposal before you tonight requests to modify the DA to allow for a multifamily development comprised of 84 units. These are distributed among 4 3-story buildings as shown here, resulting in a density of approximately 21 dwelling units per acre. The 30-foot wide landscape buffer and emergency-only connection to the residential neighborhood are proposed to remain the same, while Elder Street is proposed to terminate in a cul-de-sac. No conceptual plans have been provided for the southern portion of the property closest to the interstate. As mentioned before, the property is quite close to the Boise Airport, as shown here. From the proposed location of the southernmost multifamily building, an active taxiway lies approximately 1,000 feet away, while the closest active runway is approximately 2,000 feet away. Due to this close proximity, comments received from the Boise Airport recommend denial for the proposed residential use on this property. This recommendation of denial is supported by the planning team for reasons which can generally be categorized into 2 groups. So first, the environmental noise impacts present at this location from the day-to-day operations of the airport are not compatible with long-term residential dwellings. Most recent airport noise studies, the results of which can be seen here on the right, show that the entire property is impacted by levels of 65 decibels or louder. As detailed in the project report, there are multiple federal guidelines as well as our own comprehensive plan policies, which do not support residential development in areas experiencing these levels of noise impacts. Now, I'm sure you've noticed, but the boundaries of the airport influence areas on the left don't quite line up that well with the actual levels of noise generated by the airport on the right. So just a little bit of history here. The airport influence areas, as we see them today, were originally mapped based on noise studies conducted back in the mid-1990s. So since this time, the operations of the airport have changed and expanded, and the footprint of these noise contours have expanded without the airport influence areas being updated concurrently. So just a side note here, these applications have jump-started some ongoing discussions, which should hopefully lead to these discrepancies being remedied in the near future. So all that being said, you can see here that if we were to base the airport influence areas off of today's noise contours, this entire property would be located either in the B or B1 areas, which would either outright not allow residential development or severely limit the density. In addition to concerns over noise levels for future residents, the planning team finds that the development of residential uses on this property could have severe impacts on the operational capacity of the airport itself and the ability for the facilities to continue to act as one of the main economic drivers for the city as a whole. Most concerning is the potential for this development to jeopardize federal funding that the airport receives and depends upon. Without getting into too much detail here, there are a number of assurances that the airport has to meet in order to receive this funding. One of these is FAA Grant Assurance 21, which restricts the development of non-compatible uses in the nearby vicinity to the airport. So by FAA definition, shown here from the Part 150 noise study, residential uses are not compatible in areas within the 65 decibel and higher range, such as this property. I'll also note here that we do have Matt joining us in this meeting tonight. He is the engineering deputy director over at the airport, and will most likely be able to answer any questions about these specific programs much better than I ever could. So in conclusion, it is for these reasons that the planning team is recommending denial of both the DA modification and the plan unit development. As a reminder, the development agreement modifications, the commission is the recommending body to city council, and it is the decision-making body for the plan unit development, though these decisions may be appealed to city council. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. We'll next move to the applicant. Please start with your name and address, and we'll start with 10 minutes.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners. My name is Kevin Amar. I am with Biltmore Company, and we are located at 1580 West Cayuse Creek Drive in Meridian, Idaho. We appreciate the opportunity this evening to present Elder Street Apartments. And we believe and can show through some of our team that's with us tonight that this is a good location. And under current city code and current airport guidelines, as well as the regulations, we meet and exceed any of the current adopted city code. Tonight with me, we have, as far as the presenting team, Josh Leonard with Clark Wardle. We also have Tim Day, the property owner. This property has been in his family for in excess of a half a century. So he's pretty familiar with the property as well. The project as it sits, I want to go over just the site itself and why we designed it the way we did, as well as just some general ideas and plans of the site and the uses. Okay, I'm new to this Zoom thing as well. How do I share this? I'm sorry.
Do you need to share your screen? Hold on one moment.
I've been told that you can't hear me.
So you should be able to see a share screen button at the bottom of your screen now.
Yep, I see that button. How about now?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
So we can see you, but we can't see your screen. You need to share your screen.
I see that too. Okay. What did I do, Josh? So this is the northern portion. This is the northern portion of the project. It is an 84 unit apartment project. And a lot of what we heard at the neighborhood meeting, as well as read in the development agreement, had to do with the buffering and site access to the existing neighborhood to the west. The development agreement that is in place specifically states that it was approved, this site was rezoned, and the development agreement restricts access design as well as buffering. And so as we prepared our plan and approved and drew our plan, we kept buffering on the perimeters to exceed 30 feet, which was called for in the development agreement. In addition to that, in the development agreement, the previous plan, it had some buildings that were right up to that 30-foot line. So we wanted to pull all of our buildings as far away as possible from this. And it's also important to note that this property is truly we talk about infrastructure needing to be ready before development happens with streets and with the sewer and the utilities there. This property is truly a infill project. The sewer has been running through this property for many years. It is developed on all sides, and this is the last piece of property in that area to be developed. So it certainly does not exceed the infrastructure. The infrastructure is in place, and it also somewhat restricts the way we can develop this site due to the fact that through the center of the site is where the sewer currently runs. So we have situated the buildings in a fashion that they can use that internal courtyard area to provide an additional open space. The site itself also has a clubhouse as well as some other amenities. That clubhouse will have a gym and a gathering area and a leasing office. So there will be on-site management and leasing, and that is important for us as this is a project that not only are we building, but we are managing and maintaining over time. So we're trying to create a project that really will be beneficial to the area. The site consists of 84 total units on the apartment project. We had submitted to Josh, and I will pull it up, to Kevin, and I will pull it up later, a future concept to the south, so I can show how that circulation will play out and will look in the future, or could look in the future as we come back with additional uses. Currently, there are 60 2-bedroom, 2-bath units and 24 1-bedroom, 1-bath units. These units lease for just over $1,000 a month to just over $1,300 a month. So we feel like it's a good addition to the area. We know from previous projects that we have developed in here in this area within a few hundred feet of this project specifically, it is in high demand. We've never had vacancy in the other project, and we have such a great amount of influx of people coming into this area just due to the massive amount of work and offices that are in this area and the limited amount of residential that's in this area. So the traffic balance is drastically out of balance. There's a much traffic that comes in the morning and leaves in the afternoon, just simply due to the fact that there is there's not good opportunity for living in this area. I will get to the southern portion of the site. So if we go, again, this is the conditional use or PUD site plan that we submitted. We've worked with ACHD to provide Elder Street and a turnaround. ACHD we are in compliance with their staff report, and we will meet their recommendations as they require. Some of the things that they suggested and is important to us, as we heard from the neighbors, is making sure this access, I believe the road is called St. Andrews, will be restricted to emergency access only. The neighbors did not want additional traffic to go through there, and neither did we. We want to try to keep this area separate from that area. But Elder Street will be continued here with a cul-de-sac at the end, which allows for additional side access and future development along the freeway for additional buffering. The current sound wall ends about at this location. So we feel like we can certainly accommodate any future development and plans with the cul-de-sac and with the buffering that is allowed. One thing that is important for us in this project, and as we looked at it, we feel like we meet the standards and conditions not only of the development agreement. Again, as I stated, the development agreement restricts buffering and design, but it specifically states that any use that is allowed with an LOD can be submitted for within this project. We are submitting for 84 apartment units, which on this site is just over 21 units to the acre. We can follow up with that and know that we have the opportunity to develop the further portion to the south and create this last infill space with all that infrastructure in place, and create a nice project for the city. With that, I will stand for any questions, and in a moment turn some time over to Josh to address the staff report.
We will take questions after we hear from the neighborhood association, so please continue with your testimony if you'd like.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. My name, Madam Chair and members of the commission, my name is Joshua Leonard. My address is 251 East Front Street here in Boise, 83702. The first thing I wanted to touch on is what exactly was covered by the development agreement. I wanted to clarify that the application that was submitted isn't to permit additional uses. I want to Selena, am I still sharing the screen in here?
Yes, you are.
Okay, great, thank you. I want to point to a couple of sections that are in the existing development agreement. It only had to do, or it only dealt with buffering and design, as Kevin mentioned a moment ago. As far as uses that were permitted under that agreement, they were, and it's quoting that development agreement from section 1, those uses principally permitted and conditionally permitted as listed for the LOD zone. And multifamily residential is one of those conditionally permitted uses in the LOD zone. So the amendment to the development agreement isn't necessary for the use. It's there because of a couple of changes in what's being proposed in terms of the form and I'm going to pull up a quick comparison to show you what I mean. The 2000 DA mentioned that the uses were those principally permitted and conditionally permitted as listed for the LOD zone. As revised, it's multifamily residential, which is again conditionally permitted in that LOD zone. The circulation, building placement, and buffering under the 2000 DA were as shown on that preliminary site plan. There's no change to vehicular ingress and egress. The site plan, or excuse me, building placement obviously is modified. Instead of 3 buildings, there are 4 plus a clubhouse. And then as far as buffering, as Kevin covered, there is no change. The height of the buildings is one of the reasons for we need to amend the development agreement. You can see here in the existing development agreement, 1, 2, and 3 stories for each of those 3 buildings. The reason Sorry.
We're at 10 minutes, just as a note to the chair.
Okay.
We can add, will 5 more minutes do it for you guys, do you think?
I think between the 2 of us, probably more like 7, if that's okay.
Okay, we'll add 10 more minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. You can see here that under the existing development agreement, the 2 stories was proposed at 38 feet. The 3 stories that are proposed under the new revisions to the development agreement are at that 38-foot height. Vehicular access unchanged, limited to emergency uses and pedestrians only. And then, as I mentioned above, the buffering, 6 foot tall with mix of fencing, landscaping, and berms. There is no change. Jumping to the conditional use permit, the planned unit development. I'm going to show you a quick area overview. I believe that Kevin Holmes, city staff, showed this similar picture a moment ago. Zoom just a little bit. the X marks the spot where this location. As you can see, it's surrounded by what is office on the to the east, and then single family residential to the west and north. You can also see up through here there are a lot of multifamily development. Mostly, it looks like those are townhomes, but a lot of those around and also along the Hillcrest Golf Course over to further to the west. As Kevin showed a few minutes ago, the proposed project is depicted. The reason I show this again is because it's important with regard to the airport influence areas that we're going to discuss in just a minute. And the zoning map shows the entire parcel as LOD with the development agreement. Airport influence areas, though, you can see just barely in here the outline of the parcel. It appears to split that northern half off between the A influence area and the B1 influence area. I'm going to zoom in. This is a slide that we created to show where that lies. And that dotted line is the approximate location, and it's pretty accurate based on the city's GIS of where that influence area splits between influence area A and influence area B1, excuse me. You can see that all of the project is within that airport influence area A, in which multifamily residential is permitted subject to noise mitigation standards. If you look down here though, the dotted line, only one half of one of the buildings is in that stricter airport influence area B1. That's extremely important to the development, because by far the majority of the development is permitted within that airport influence area A. The staff report includes several references to Federal Aviation Administration grant assurances. And in fact, it lists the Federal Aviation Administration grant assurances as one of two reasons to deny. It recommends denial of this application. However, if you read the grant assurance closely, that FAA Grant Assurance 21, it doesn't say with regard to specific applications. It deals with the zoning that's prescribed for particular areas. It says that the city is to comply with the noise studies by implementing zoning, not by denying specific applications. Again, the first of those issues, the noise impacts that would occur in this area, are easily is mitigatable a word? If it isn't, I'm still going to use it, but are easily mitigated by including additional noise mitigation standards in construction. And I can tell you that Biltmore Construction their standards are higher than what is required in the city's zoning ordinance. And I'd like Kevin, if he doesn't mind, just to mention what those standards are for sound reduction.
Good evening. This is Kevin Amar again. The mitigation standards for airport influence area A is a 25 decibel reduction, and in airport influence area B is a 30 decibel reduction. Our decibel reduction at a minimum on any of our construction standards is a 40 decibel reduction. And so we exceed all that is required in airport influence area B by more than 25%. And we almost double what is required in airport influence area A. Our exterior walls, due to our OSB and our house wrap and our insulative qualities, as well as the foam ceiling that we do, achieves almost 50 decibel reduction in sound. So that would be double what is required between the units and the units that are side by side. I can get into the specifics if you like, but we're at a 60 decibel reduction. From the roof, we're at a 48 decibel reduction. And so with all of this, we far exceed any requirements allowed. The airport influence area A again has a 25 decibel reduction. Even in the airport influence area B, per the adopted airport guidelines, we can't ask for an increase in density, and we are not doing that. We are simply going to meet their guidelines and requirements that they are suggesting by exceeding their 30 decibel reduction. I will turn the time back over to Josh.
Josh Leonard again. One of the things that's important to take into consideration, and I know most of the commissioners have, well, I shouldn't say most, several of the commissioners have been on the commission for some time. One of the truest standards in considering these applications is that you can't hold an applicant to a standard that hasn't been adopted. It's a violation of the applicant's procedural due process. And this applicant is entitled to rely upon the standards that existed at the time they filed the application. The noise and airport related restrictions that are mentioned in the staff report simply didn't exist and don't apply and don't exist now because they were not adopted when the application was filed. And to my knowledge, again, have not been subsequently adopted. The staff report mentions several, actually 12 different land use guidelines. It only quotes one of them. It says, City of Boise and Ada County to maintain commercial and industrial zoned areas within the AIA as such, the AIA being the airport influence area. The primary intent of this measure is to preserve this land for compatible future development and to avoid rezoning of these areas. Again, to maintain commercial and industrial zoned areas and to avoid rezoning of the areas. This isn't an industrial and it isn't a commercially zoned area. We're not asking for a rezone. It is LO and we're asking that it stay that way. We're just taking advantage of the density that's allowed under that. Also, we're not rezoning it out of commercial or industrial, so that that one of the 12 guidelines that was quoted in the staff report just doesn't apply. As acknowledged by the staff report, the airport influence area boundaries have not been updated since 1996, with the last noise update occurring in 2004. There also is no airport overlay zone. That's one of the ways that the airport could, if it chose, influence the city to adopt an airport overlay zone that prohibits the type of development that is being proposed here. That just isn't the case. This type of development is allowed in that airport influence area A, and in airport influence area B1, although multifamily is not allowed pursuant to that the adopted comprehensive plan. That's not in the zoning code, which is, as you know, the controlling law. And only one half of one of the 4 buildings is even within that area B1. The staff report also admits that it applies standards that don't govern the subject property. Although the subject parcel is only adjacent to the airport planning area, which is different than the airport influence area, adjacent to the airport planning area, the staff report quoted, the planning team finds it appropriate to also review this proposed development under the goals and principles of the airport planning area. In other words, applying a standard to it that isn't adopted with regard to that property. And I'd ask you to think about what that means for the applicant. It goes through the cost and expense in both time and money to submit a quality application in good faith, only to learn that it will be held to an unadopted airport standard regarding noise. And then it will also be held to standards that govern adjacent properties, not this property, but adjacent properties. I'd submit that that's the definition of arbitrary and capricious, holding the applicant to standards that are not contained in city's zoning code with regard to this property.
Chair, time.
And I can wrap up. I'm less than a minute away. The staff report says in multiple places that the noise measured in this area is what makes the subject property incompatible for one of those reasons. That's why noise mitigation standards exist in the zoning code. And it takes it below that 65 that they say was measured in that unadopted 2018 or 2016 study, and knocks those down. I would submit that this application complies with all of the currently adopted standards for development on this property and is entitled to be approved. And with that, we would stand for questions.
Thank you. First, we'll see if there's anybody present representing the Hillcrest Neighborhood Association. If so, please virtually raise your hand. Okay, seeing none, we will move on to questions from the commission for the staff and the applicant.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Squires.
I don't know if this is for staff or for perhaps legal. I guess my question is, the applicant has stated that these standards weren't in place in 2000, but if they're asking to amend the development agreement, doesn't that open this back up to the current standards and require to be brought back up to all the, I guess, studies and conditions that would be applicable today? Does that make sense?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, I may have to defer to legal on the specifics of what exactly you're asking there about what can be entertained when you reopen up a development agreement there. I don't know, James, if you're available.
And Madam Commissioner, I'm a little bit unclear on the question also. Perhaps you could clarify it, and maybe it might be cleaner to just ask a question and ask staffs and applicants' positions or their relative positions on whatever your question is. And then if you need further clarification, maybe we can go from there.
Commissioner Squires, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I wanted to clarify, this is Josh Leonard with the applicant. We're not saying that we're not saying that we only comply with the 2000 standards. We're saying we comply with the standards today. We comply with 2020 standards that are in place right now. We just don't comply with standards that haven't yet been adopted.
Okay.
Commissioner Stevens. Oh, I'm sorry. Was that Commissioner Squires again?
I was just going to say, I think that answers my question, but I may come back to this. Thank you.
Commissioner Stevens.
This is a question for staff. Kevin, can you explain why we're viewing this and you analyzed it as a rezone?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Stevens, I'll turn on my camera for you so you're not speaking to a, if you can forgive me for a beard and not getting a haircut in a while, but I can take a stab at your question there. So the criteria with which it's reviewed under, those rezone criteria are what is listed under the specific procedures in code that we were supposed to take a look at these DA modification applications.
So when you modify a DA, it's written in code that we are to consider that a rezone, and that is the reason that we are using that criteria to determine the ability of this project to meet our code. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Bratnober.
Thank you. I wanted to check in on one thing regarding the FAA grants, et cetera. So if I'm interpreting them right, which is that's probably part of my question, it sounds like there's a concern that putting this kind of housing in that area would restrict normal operations of the airport, and hence the funding would not be available in that grant. And I'm not sure who among staff, legal, et cetera, I'm addressing this to. Let's start with you, Kevin.
I think Matt there, okay. Madam Chair, Commissioner Bratnober, I think Matt may be best equipped to answer that question.
Okay, great. Oh, there he is, sorry.
I think you're on mute, Matt.
Madam Chair and members of the commission. As part of our receiving federal aid, federal grants each year, the grant assurances are part of that. And it wouldn't affect our operations, but it would immediately, but it would affect they could withhold funding from us, future funding, because we did not abide by the grant assurances. And this is something the city adopts. And basically, we're required to ensure that non-compatible development doesn't hamper the future airport operations or ability to expand. And our recent noise study and an independent one done by the Air Force show that our future development is going to severely impact or will impact this area with noise. And I'll point out that people are not in their house 24/7. They're outside. There's play areas. They won't be able to enjoy their patios. We've had public meetings with master plans and such, where we've had a lot of neighbors from these surrounding areas express concerns about the noise and the impact to children and development of children. And it's just in our best interest to address this issue.
Okay, which sort of leads me to another piece, which is there's a fair number of residences close by, some that appear to be even closer than some of the things in this proposed development, closer to the airport. So I'm assuming that that's a grandfather thing. They've been there a long time, et cetera. Is there any history on that we could know about?
Madam Chair and the members of the commission, most of this housing went in the early 70s before when the airport was much smaller operation, quieter aircraft. Yes, it was before any of these standards were put into place. And we do have a lot of concerns about those neighborhoods, and the neighbors have expressed concerns with the airport impact on them. We're just trying to be a good neighbor and not create a situation in the future that we got to deal with in the future, an adverse situation.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Moore.
I have a question. When the property was rezoned in 1999, I think it's probably a question for the staff, was residential allowed in the limited office district at that time?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Moore, I would have to look that up. I actually don't know off the top of my head what the development code had 20 years ago. I assume that there was some provisions for conditionally allowed residential back then in the LOD, but I would have to confirm that with you.
Madam Chair, if I may, I did confirm that it was a conditionally approved use in 2000 under the limited office, under the code that existed at that time.
Was that Mr. Leonard?
It was, I apologize. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may, this is
Sorry,
Mr.
The applicant can only respond at this time to the commission's questions.
And
so we'll just see.
It's actually a response to an earlier question by Commissioner Stevens. I believe there's some misunderstanding about why this was considered under the rezone specific procedure, because the rezone specific procedure is listed on a page in the code that includes development, that still talks about development agreement, but there's nothing in the code that says a development agreement modification needs to go through a rezone analysis. If you look at page 35 of the zoning code, where it has figure 11-03.2 development agreement procedure, and then 2 pages later is the rezone procedure, but there's no link between the two of those. I think that's a mistake, and that a development agreement modification doesn't get treated as a rezone. or it shouldn't under the city's code. There's nothing in there that says that.
Commissioner Stevens, you're muted.
Could we get some clarification from legal on that?
Hello, commissioners, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, so I refer the commissioners to the development agreement procedure. That's section 11-03-04(2). And application processing requires review by planning and zoning and requires public hearing by council. Modification requires public hearing by city council and a recommendation from planning and zoning. The rezone findings are essentially incorporated in the development agreement finding, in that the development agreement is put in place so that the rezone findings, so that the rezone criteria could be met. And so the commission might, to further develop the point, might inquire as to staff or the applicant's positions on why the rezone criteria wouldn't be relevant, or what kind of disconnect there is there. I'm not sure I understand that point, but I just refer the commission to that section there as it has used before.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the commission? Okay.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Bratnober.
I raised my hand. I should have just spoken up. So I'm still trying to wrap my hands around this grant. And so I'll direct this question back to Matt. Do we have confidence that the funds would be pulled if this development was allowed to go forward, or what are the swing factors in this thing?
Madam Chair and members of the commission, it is not an automatic thing. It would be, it puts it at risk is all it does. It's up to the local community to police this stuff and protect their local resources, airports, such. And they are putting that on us to be responsible and protect our airport resource and infrastructure. And I just say we agree to it as a city as for the funding, and they take it seriously. I don't know how to respond to that other than it just puts us at risk.
Okay, even though, excuse me, Madam Chair?
Commissioner Bratnober.
Continuing, sorry. So it's not clear to me, based on where the noise standards are, what we would be violating with respect to the grant outline. And so that's what I'm trying to wrap my hands around.
So if I could chime in, Madam Chair and members of the commission, Rebecca Hupp, Airport Director, to answer the commissioner's question about the grant assurance. Grant 21 is really, we have, as Matt mentioned, we have a series of assurances that we as the city that we agree to do. And one of them is to ensure that we secure and protect the future operation of the airport, including proper zoning. And zoning is a local issue and a local item, and therefore it's directed, basically the FAA is directing the city to ensure proper zoning. And the city, because it accepted the grant, says that it will do that. And the previous noise studies show that this area is noise impacted, meaning it has 65 decibels or more, in which case residential housing is not a compatible land use, even with mitigation. So hopefully that clarifies it.
All right. So, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Bratnober.
So maybe just one more question. So it seems like, excuse me for a moment. It seems like after all is said and done, the LOD zoning, which currently applies, regardless of the outcome, it's still going to remain LOD. And we're using the zoning, the rezoning analysis, but the zoning is not going to change. Is that correct? Oh, sorry, Kevin.
Kevin, you need it.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Bratnober, that is correct. Yes, the zoning would remain the same.
So, Madam Chair?
Commissioner Bratnober.
So if that's the case, then it seems that if this were approved, that nothing's been done that would change the zoning from what it is and thereby jeopardize the grant funding. Is my logic correct there?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Bratnober, the multifamily use is a conditionally allowed use. So it's at your discretion. So by approving that conditional use, in effect, it wouldn't be, it would hit those, it would be a residential use in an area with which the FAA and the city has, the airport operations have concluded that it would not be appropriate in.
Okay, Madam Chair, one more question. I think this might be my last.
Go ahead, Commissioner Bratnober.
So as you look at it, as you look at complaints, because I'm assuming or interpreting from what I read that level of complaints are that's one of the metrics that you have of how good or bad our decision was. Are you seeing a high rate of complaints from the other residences nearby? I mean, is there some sort of baseline where you'd say, oh, gosh, if we do this, we don't want to go beyond this level of complaints, or something that would give us an idea of how objectionable it is at this point with what you've got?
Madam Chair and members of the commission, we really don't use that type of metric because you can't look at the current condition. We got to look at the future condition as the airport expands in the future, which it will. It'll grow with the city as Air Force or military missions change to a more louder aircraft. It will have a bigger impact. And this is what we're comparing it to, is those future conditions. Currently, we have the A-10, which is a very quiet military aircraft, but we know that it's going to be retired in at some time in the near future. And the next mission will be louder and it will have an impact. And so when I say the noise complaints was when we've had public outreach and public meetings, both talking about the master plan, growth of the airport, and our noise study. We had a tremendous outpouring from the public in that area, expressing concerns about airport noise and growth and its impact to that area. And so these are the things where we specifically, the airport or the FAA wants to prevent, is to create those situations where you got this adversarial where we can't grow the airport with the community.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. For the record, that was Matt again. I see the applicant has his hand raised. Was that in reply to this question specifically? Mr. Leonard, that's for you, that question.
We're trying to figure out the unmute. Yes, that was in specific, an answer to that specific question, Madam Chair. We built and manage a project within 100 yards of this location. It's called the Owyhee Park Apartments. We have a waiting list of people that want to live there, and we specifically asked them if the noise from the airport was a deterrence of them living there. And it was from everyone that answered, no, not at all. So we know, although there may be some arbitrary data that we may have to live up to in the future, the empirical data that we have from current residents that live in apartments that we recently built under these standards, it is not a deterrent from them living there at all.
Thank you. And actually, I have a question, I think, for staff, but would the rezone have still been required if the new noise information had not come out? Would they still require a rezone for this project?
Madam Chair, if I'm understanding your question correctly, the noise studies that is basically the ancillary information that we're using to examine this application through. It's not part of the criteria per se of the rezone. It's basically like if ACHD would have said that the roads were too busy, this is the airport saying that the noise is too high. So it's a lens through which we're analyzing. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any other questions from the, oh, I see Ms. Hupp has her hand raised. Do you have an answer to that question?
I do have just one answer to the commissioner's question about the number of complaints. And as Matt mentioned, we're not necessarily tracking the number of complaints, although I would mention that in response to our master plan and the noise study, we received hundreds of comments about noise level from the airport, primarily from the areas adjacent to this area. But the metric that FAA directs us to use is the 65 decibel level, which is the metric that we're using here, because noise is very subjective. It's very emotional, and some people are very sensitive to it. And then some people, quite frankly, don't care about noise. So it's more about how a person perceives noise than the actual noise itself. So that's why we use the 65 decibel standard and not the number of complaints that we receive. And it's very clear that the 65 decibel standard, FAA has said it's not compatible with residential use.
Thank you. Do we have any remaining questions from the commission before we move
Madam
on?
Chair,
Commissioner Moore.
I was just wondering if that airport part 150 study that's noted in the staff report is available for viewing anywhere, or if there's anywhere online or in the blueprint that could be found.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Moore, yes, there's a couple links within the project report that should take you there. And it is available on our website as well as the airport's website. It's a rather lengthy, I believe it's over 700 pages long, so some good nighttime reading.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no more questions from the commission, cautiously, we will move on. We have the only person we have on the sign-up sheet is Teresa Sorelli. So we'll start there, please. Teresa, are you there? Teresa, I see the hand raised. You are able to speak. Can we hear from you? Okay. Having not heard from Teresa, I will move on to the other attendees, and we'll try Teresa one more time before we move on from public comment. So if you are here but have not signed up to speak and would like to speak, please virtually raise your hand. And we'll start first with My name is blocked, but the person who has their name, their hand raised.
We'll start
there's
with
two now. So let's start with Kubik, please.
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, please start with your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Okay, my name is Charmel Kubik. I live at 3914 West St. Andrews Drive. And I basically have a question for them. I want to know if they've taken into consideration the impact on the traffic on Elder and Owyhee and what it's going to do to all of our side streets. Because when they started putting the offices in there, people would come up Roosevelt and hit all of our side streets and they would speed. Our street itself is very narrow, so we're very concerned about the traffic. When I was going to and from work with the office buildings and the hotels there, Elder became almost impassable. So if they're going to put that many more units in there, that many more cars, what is the impact going to be on those streets?
Thank you. We'll move on next to Ms. Holly, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Please start with your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Mari Holly, and I represent the building owners at 3501 South Elder, which is just to the east. We are the large multi-tenant building just after the hotel. And then I also represent the building owners at 3130 Owyhee Street, which is across from Owyhee Park, and a little further down at 3301 Owyhee Elder Street, which is a little bit further down Elder Street. I'm just interested to know if ACHD made any comment in relation to installing a stop sign on Elder traveling to the east.
Ms. Holly, sorry, this is not the time for questions, but you can ask questions that the applicant may choose to address in the rebuttal.
Well, what I was meaning is if I haven't seen a report from ACHD, so I just didn't know if they had responded to the application, as we've only been discussing the airport requirements.
Okay, we cannot answer questions at this time, but the applicant may choose to answer that in the rebuttal. Okay, so if that's all that, we will move on then. Is there, Ms. Holly, was at the end of your testimony, just to clarify?
That's fine, yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other virtual hands raised. Now's your last chance if you would still like to testify on this item tonight.
Madam Chair, I changed Teresa Sorelli to a panelist. We might try to have her unmute.
Okay.
Now.
Teresa Sorelli, are you available to testify on this item?
Virtual hand raise? I'm gonna raise. Oh, okay.
Is Teresa's last call for Teresa Sorelli to testify on this item? Okay. I will cautiously move forward. And it seems that Ms. Sorelli is not available to testify on this item. Okay, so we will move to rebuttal from the applicant for 5 minutes, please.
Commissioner Stead, this is Josh Leonard. We actually have one member of the public here in our that didn't want to do it at home, so he came to our office here to testify. Can we let him testify? I apologize. I just didn't want to interrupt earlier. but he has public testimony.
Okay, please start with your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi there, good evening. My name is Tim Day, and I'm owner of the property. I've been in ownership over 20 years, and I realize it's an important piece of property. And I always considered this a density infill as far as meeting the needs of the depot area and behind it as far as densifying Boise living opportunities. And I think this is a quality development that will achieve this. There are successful townhouses within a stone's throw, successful apartments within a stone's throw, and a lot of people want to live here because of the proximity and advantages it has to Boise. And that's my main reason for liking this project to go forward, because of the quality and what it can do for the tax base of Boise and the infill needs of Boise in the Bench area. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Okay.
Madam Chair,
yeah.
Teresa is having audio issues. I've suggested she try calling in on the phone number so she can give her testimony. We might just give her a second to do that.
Great.
She is trying to find that email for that phone number. Oh, Teresa just said we didn't receive an email. All right, hold on one moment. Teresa, I can't find that phone number for you. The only phone number I have is for a host link, which is what I'm playing right now. So I can't give that one to you exactly. Let's see. All right, hold on, I found it. Okay, she has the number. So Teresa, the number I gave you is, you have to dial that number and then you have to put in a webinar ID. And that's that 6-digit number I gave to you next. Okay, Teresa said the meeting ID didn't exist, so she said thank you for the time for the commissioners and just have them review the comments that were submitted. Teresa, we'll make sure to reach out prior to the council hearing because this will go to city council. So if you registered for tonight, we'll have your contact information and we'll reach out to you tomorrow. With that, Madam Chair, I believe we can do rebuttal from the applicant.
Yeah, and I would just also add that we definitely read every comment that is sent to us. We read the entire staff packet, which includes the public comments that are sent in advance. So we appreciate that written testimony just as much. And if that is what you are testifying on tonight, it has definitely been received and noted. Okay, moving on to testimony from, or rebuttal from the applicant, please. You'll have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. This is Josh Leonard again. I'm going to speak for a couple minutes and I'm going to let Kevin Amar close it out. One of the things I wanted to touch on was this, people keep referring to a 65 decibel rating for this property. That's actually incorrect. The last approved noise study for this parcel was 60 decibels, not 65. And also, I appreciate what Mr. Pataya said about that this is for future conditions that will exist at the airport, not existing conditions. And to me, to hold an applicant in a land use hearing where a property right is at stake to what may or may not happen in the future based on a future condition is improper. Also, just really quickly to Commissioner Bratnover's point a few minutes ago, he made a really good point that I hadn't caught. To the extent that any violation of grant assurances occurred in this matter, it occurred when the property was left as LOD zoning, not as a basis of this application. As I said earlier, it isn't one application that causes one of those causes a violation. It's zoning. The airport agreed, and I caught a word that Ms. Hupp said that was important there. She said that the airport or the city agrees to uphold standards, meaning that they're contractual, and that those standards that are in federal guidelines, when the city accepts that money, they contract with the federal government that they won't violate that. I would also argue that that the airport's written objection to the application likely qualifies as the, and I'm going to quote the federal regulation here, that Grant Assurance 21 likely qualifies as, quote, taking appropriate actions to the extent reasonable that would protect that grant assurance, and it's as required by those grant assurance. I would put something out there with regard to noise. I would put to the commission, consider adopting an additional, maybe a little bit creative condition of approval. For example, requiring or imposing a requirement. If we're worried about complaints, if we're worried about people complaining, and as you've heard from Kevin Amar, his development that's 100 feet away doesn't get noise complaints. But to the extent you want to add another level of protection against those complaints, require as a condition of approval that a restrictive covenant be entered against the property, requiring all rental agreements for these units to be to notify them that the airport's nearby and it can get loud. And I know that sounds silly because we know the airport's nearby and that it can get loud, but to make sure that it's in there, I think that's a key way to get that done. I'd also respectfully disagree with the interpretation of specific procedures to call this to look at the rezone. It just doesn't say that in the code. And besides that, in this case, we're not asking for an amendment of the zoning. We're asking for a non-substantive, I take that back, it is substantive, it's just non-substantive with regard to the zoning and the use. It's substantive with regard to the design, which is what that development agreement covers. I'd turn it over to Kevin for a minute.
Commissioners, for the record, Kevin Amar. We appreciate your time this evening. We're happy and proud to present this project. We know that we are working on an infill project and one that has long been underused for a piece of property that has all the current infrastructure completed. We are making this application under the guidelines of the current city code and the current development agreement. One of the limitations of the development agreement, and it's item number 10, specifically states that this agreement is related to design and buffering items and does not relate to the use of property as permitted in the LOD zone. And this is important. The owner may submit applications for uses permitted and conditional uses as listed in the LOD zone. So as we made this application, we looked at the noise buffering, we looked at the surrounding areas, we looked at the site buffering, and we really tried to complete a project and provide a project that will meet all those criteria. And we feel like we've done that. We know it's a high quality project. We know through construction standards, we can meet any noise mitigation that is contemplated in the city and far exceed that noise mitigation, and we've done it recently. So at this time, we would simply ask for your recommendation for approval, and we really appreciate your time this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now close this portion of the hearing, and the item is before the commission. The chair will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Bratnober.
I move we recommend approval on CAR 20-3 and that we approve PUD 20-3. Now, let me just leave the motion there. There's some more that should go with it, but we can talk about that during discussion.
So maybe let's start. What if we look at these separately, if we're not getting a second, and maybe talk about each individually?
Sure.
Commissioner Stevens.
Just a point of order. Did the motion die for lack of second? And if so, I'd like to make a motion.
That's my understanding. Yes, the motion has died for lack of second. So Commissioner Stevens.
I'd like to move that we recommend denial of, sorry, hang on. I got to get the numbers. I have codes and plans up and recommend denial of PUD, deny PUD 20-3 and recommend denial of CAR 20-3.
I'll second
that motion.
Okay, I heard Commissioner Schaefer first. So second by Commissioner Schaefer.
I defer to Commissioner Schaefer.
Yeah. Okay, let's start with discussion. Commissioner Stevens.
I find this to be a fairly straightforward denial. I'm very comfortable with why we use the rezone criteria for this particular application, having looked at the code and the code chapters that were pointed out by legal and by staff. And I think staff did a very good job of explaining in the staff report that we have in front of us why this project does not meet the criteria of a rezone. Now, I understand that we're not really rezoning this, we're maintaining a zone, but I think it's really important to recognize that they also have to, this is not an allowed use in the zone, it is a conditional use in the zone. And therefore, we also have to look at the criteria for planned unit development, again, which I think that staff has done an excellent job showing why this does not, this proposal does not meet the criteria that we need here. I think for us as commissioners to question airport staff about when we will or will not put our city in jeopardy of FAA funding is probably sort of a fool's errand. We probably shouldn't do that. We have an airport staff here who does nothing but deal with the airport and airport policy and the city's relationship with the FAA all the time. And I'm certainly not comfortable questioning any of that myself. With regard to the question about whether or not the city can or cannot, quote unquote, take actions that are reasonable to protect the grant, I think that that's exactly what we're doing here. Because of the, and I'm not a lawyer, but because we are looking at this as this is basically a zoning question that we're asking here. It's not just simply an application, it's a zoning question because again, we're dealing with conditional use. And therefore, as I understand this whole application and the entire discussion that we've had, we are doing exactly what that grant asks us to do, which is to use the city's power of zoning to make and to take reasonable actions to protect the use of the airport, which is a municipal use that is critical to our city's continued growth and development. So I think we're complying with everything that the various plans and codes are asking us to do. And I do not think that this is the place for a multifamily development. I don't think it has really anything to do, at least according to airport staff, with whether or not we're getting complaints or not. It's much more clear cut than that. It's much more objective. And therefore, I really strongly believe it's very clear cut and we need to deny this application.
Further discussion?
Madam Chair.
Sorry, Commissioner Schaefer.
Thank you. I'm in favor of the motion, obviously, and I'm going to second all of Commissioner Stevens' comments. And just to piggyback on those comments a little bit, I think where I'm coming down with it too is that there's a lot of other things they can do under this zoning with this piece of land, right? It doesn't have to be a residential development. The LO zone permits many uses, from office space to other services. So I feel like we're not by any means putting them in a position where they're not going to be able to have a successful project on this piece of property under this zone. Because at the end of the day, at a high level, I agree with Commissioner Stevens. I don't think we should, it's our place to question the airport management staff. And at the end of the day, I don't really want to put another 85 families in a position where they're uncomfortable with the noise that the airport creates. So again, I think with the other allowed uses in the LO zone, I think they have the opportunity to create a successful project on this piece of property. So therefore, I'm in favor of the motion.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Bratnober.
So my reasons for wanting to approve are based on a couple of things. We've talked a lot at length about the zoning piece, but just to reiterate briefly, zoning is not going to change no matter what we do here. It will stay LOD. And so from that, I'm trying to be quite literal about what's actually going to happen to the zone and what those outside of Boise, i.e. FAA, would see when they look at this. They would not see a zoning change. One of the other notes that was made to the issue of gee, we're going to send these 85 families in to be bombarded with noise, and they're totally, they don't know what they're getting into. I'm not sure I buy that. One of the things that was actually proposed in the rebuttal, I did like, which is full disclosure. Well, let's make sure that there is full disclosure so people understand what they're getting into. We're talking about 85 dwelling units that qualify at the lower end of the housing cost spectrum, which we sorely need in this city. As regards questioning airport officials, frankly speaking, that's what we did here, was we asked them questions about these things. We're talking about discussions that are looking into the future, when a lot of things can change, including what's going to be going in and out of the airport. And so, yes, I believe as a planning and zoning commission, it is our job to ask these questions. So again, I think while it may be that some pieces are out of sync in terms of, are we looking at LOD with some kind of conditional use because it is not an allowed use, it's a conditional use, et cetera, et cetera. I would be interested in understanding if a different approach makes sense, or if we're saying, just can't put dwelling units in that area, even though substantial parts of it do fall within the A zone of less than 6, I believe it was less than 65 dB. I'm trying to look at the map here, and it's really sketchy in terms of trying to zero in on that particular place. So I'll have to take the applicant's word for it on that one. That's it.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Moore.
I also want to say I will be supporting the denial for this, but I would like to challenge the planning and zoning staff. I know in the staff report, it was mentioned that there's inconsistencies between things shown on there because there's no airport overlay district, and to develop an airport overlay district or develop some things that will start to help rectify some of those inconsistencies that they mentioned in their staff report.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Blanchard.
I'd also like to, carry on with what Commissioner Moore said, in that we've got a venerable planning and ownership group here on this parcel. And I think they fully understand what's going on here, and they probably planned for it. Our role at P&Z is to interpret city code and the comprehensive plan. And what has been shown here is that there are clearly gaps, as Commissioner Moore noted. And we're being asked to interpret a gray zone here with city policy. And I think it's only right that this get kicked up to city council and let them decide, what they think, what they intend with their policy. And I think it's just not clear for us to interpret code and the comp plan at this time. And I think I'm going to recommend denial as well, so that it can get kicked up and let the elected policymakers weigh in on how they feel about policy.
Okay. Seeing no more questions from the commission, so we have a motion in front of us to recommend denial of CAR 20-3 and deny PUD 20-3. Will the clerk please call the vote?
Stead.
Aye.
Schaefer.
Aye.
Squires.
Aye.
Blanchard.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Stevens.
Aye.
Ratnover.
Nay.
6 ayes, 1 opposed, motion carries.
And we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for your patience with our ever-changing technology. Have a great night.
Nice job,
Take care,
Meredith.
guys.
Nice job,
Bye-bye.
Sigrid.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Night, thank you.
Good job, everybody.